It is Wednesday, my dudes, which means it's time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This one will be on Guard Captain Krau, the newest 5-star that you can pull starting with the Epic 7 Origin update. In case you haven't seen it already, there's also 2 other impressions videos that are on the channel here today. One for Victorica, the newest 4-star that you'll be getting for free with the update, as well as ML Arunka, who is going to be the next Moonlight 5-star hero. As always, I'll link those videos down in this video's description, but for now, you know why you're here, for my main man, Krau. As with all First Thoughts Initial Impressions videos, I'll give you my 2 cents on him. Do I think he's good? Where would I play him? What types of equipment sets and artifacts would I play him on? All that stuff you've come to expect from me in a First Impressions video. So let's not waste any more time and check out his kick-ass S3 animation.
Whatever happens, happens, I guess. Let's get it over with. I need some shut-eye. I may be no hero, but I can still be your worst nightmare. Last chance to run.
Pretty cool, right? But then again, everything Krau does is cool. I'm stoked that this is going to be our main character for the 6th world story in the Epic 7 Origin update. In case you're wondering in the English dub which gentleman voices this badass character, it is none other than Bill Rogers, who's most known for playing Brock and the Pokemon Lucario in the Pokemon franchise in recent years. And for my fighting game fans out there, he's also Urien from Street Fighter V. Moving on to Krau's stats, he is a Fire Warrior of the Aries Zodiac symbol, which means he shares a stat line with Abigail, Laia, Urban Shadow Shu, and the collab hero Edward Elric. Taking a closer look at his stats, he has 984 attack, 637 defense, 6,266 health, 117 speed, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, and no starting effectiveness or effect resistance. This translates to above average speed and pretty balanced stats across the board. As you can no doubt tell by the other characters he shares a stat line with, it's a pretty good stat line overall. His imprint is going to be health percentage for the team, and his self-imprint is going to be defense percentage for himself. Since he is a defense scaling hero, imprints are pretty good on him, but overall, you don't necessarily need them. As always, before we talk about the character impressions, let's go over their kit so that way we're all on the same page. Starting with Krau's basic attack skill, Crimson Flame. He gains 15 to 20% combat readiness depending on skill level. Additionally, a successful attack deals additional damage proportional to Krau's defense, and the move naturally scales off of Krau's max defense. Do keep in mind, a successful attack means that you actually have to land a hit on the character, so if you miss due to blind or dodge, you will not get that additional damage proc.
Don't go dodging that.
Moving on to Krau's skill 2, it is Comet. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 3-turn cooldown. This is a single target attack that has a 100% chance to stun the target for 1 turn. Additionally, that target has their combat readiness decreased by 35 to 50%, depending on skill level. When Krau is granted Vigor, either through his skill 3 or through other means, this move ignores effect resistance. The damage dealt also increases proportional to Krau's max defense.
Now, don't be a wuss.
And finally, Krau's skill 3, Seething Flames. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 3 to 4 turn cooldown depending on skill level. After granting Krau Vigor for 3 turns, he performs an AoE attack that returns some of the damage he deals as health. It increases the combat readiness of Krau by 50%. This move cannot trigger a critical hit, but does penetrate 100% of the target's defense. Additionally, the move deals damage proportional to Krau's max defense. Soul Burn effect for the cost of 10 souls increases the damage dealt of Seething Flames, but changes it from an AoE attack to a single target attack.
I may be no hero, but I can still be your worst nightmare.
Now that you understand Guard Captain Krau's kit, let's talk about the character. Krau is a powerful bruiser with pronounced strengths and weaknesses, which is much more preferable to some of the incredibly degenerate characters of the last year or so. Some of you may hear me say that and think, wow, Krau is bad, but that could not be further from the truth. In fact, this character is actually quite flexible in terms of how he plays and how he can be built, and I think that makes him very good. Let's start with his bread and butter skill, Seething Flames. This move does nearly everything you could want on a DPS outside of cleansing him of all debuffs. But you have to remember, Krau's a warrior now, not a knight, which means that Sweet Miracle is always on the table for him as an artifact choice. Vigor for 3 turns on him as a defense scaler is actually massive. Most defense scaling heroes like Ikarina, Designer Lilibet, and Lionheart Sarmia have always needed a defense buff to be really good at their job. But that's just a normal defense buff in a format full of buff stripping abilities. And those characters all have conditionals to get their buffs, such as needing an ally to be low on health, have a certain number of debuffs on your team, or your opponent needs to, say, counterattack you. Krau just gets an undispellable defense buff increase for free before he actually deals damage. The move is an AoE true damage nuke, which historically has always been good on any character that has it. Note that it is true damage, not fixed damage, meaning it's not affected by Fallen Cecilia, who will see a huge uptick in play this patch. In addition, the move is good whether you are the aggressor in the match because it has 50% combat readiness, allowing you to keep on the pressure, or being more of a reactive player because it has a bunch of built-in lifesteal. That said, a huge AoE nuke that penetrates defense isn't exactly always desirable in this format. This is the primary reason that my favorite character, Lionheart Sarmia, is actual trash in this current format. She just presses her ultimate skill, and it activates Bloodmoon Haste, Dragon Bride Senya passive, Janua passive, and whatever other busted passive it seems like Smilegate put out in 2024. Krau doesn't have that issue though. He could just soul burn his skill 3 and turn it into a super nuke on a single target, which gives him a huge amount of flexibility. Speaking of flexibility, did I mention that this move is on a 3-turn cooldown, making it extremely spammable with characters like Laya, Last Rider Krau, or Sylvan Sage Vivian on your team. Finally, Seething Flames can't trigger a critical hit, which is a gigantic tip-off in my opinion on how you should build this character, and it will become clear when we talk about his basic attack skill, Crimson Flame. Honestly, for a basic, this is pretty incredible. It gives 20% combat readiness, which is standard for most basic attack skills in 2025. But this move also has Rocket Punch Gauntlet stapled to it if you actually land a successful hit. Rocket Punch Gauntlet starts to really generate a lot of value around 2600 plus defense, and I'm assuming that this will very much be the same way with Krau once we take a look at his numbers. Since skill 3 can't crit, and skill 1 would get more value out of building straight defense, this feels like the dev team's not so subtle way of saying, hey, don't build crit on this character, just go pure bruiser. And Krau is going to be on the Ares Zodiac stat line, which is actually one of the best stat lines for this in the game. Remember, this is the same stat line that gave us Laya, right? Meaning you could just super invest in just health, defense, and speed and no other stats, and the character will play out extraordinarily well. Finally, let's talk about his skill 2, Comet. This move is the only attack in Krau's arsenal that kind of loses out if you don't build critical hit chance on it, but honestly, who really cares? This thing is a 50% combat readiness pushback with a guaranteed 1-turn stun if you use it after Seething Flames. Let me repeat that. It ignores effect resistance and pushes back somebody 50% combat readiness and stuns them, ignoring ER. That is an insane skill that generates a ton of tempo, and that's especially true if you pair him with the aforementioned Laya, Last Rider Krau, or Sylvan Sage Vivian in a tempo comp. This move makes him just an amazing role player in various teams, from aggro to standard to hard control comps. He's going to be great in a lot of different scenarios. And since Krau only really needs 3 stats to be successful, I feel like his build path is pretty open. Speed is going to be the obvious choice. Just build him over 2600 defense and put the rest of your stats into health and speed, and you're good to go. Counter also feels like a pretty amazing choice since every counter he uses gives him 20% combat readiness and a Rocket Punch Gauntlet-esque damage proc. The only reason I don't think counter is a slam dunk best in slot option here is because of how prevalent Mort is in the current format. Revenge and Protection Set also seem like worthwhile build paths to try out as well, depending on the stats that you could actually get with your gear. And now as for 2-piece sets, I feel like Immunity reigns supreme in the current format, so that's what my go-to would be, but I do think that Defense, Health, and Unity could be solid alternatives. Let's move on to talking about artifacts, and I can think of no better place to start than his own. It is Thorn of the Blue Rose. At the start of the first battle, the wearer gains 10 souls. When attacking, it increases your damage by 5 to 10% based on artifact level, and increases the damage of your character's soul burn by 10 to 20% based on artifact level. If you've been playing Epic 7 for a while, you probably already know how good this artifact is. If you're a returning or new player though, starting PvP matches with souls is perhaps the most broken thing you could do in the game. As for the damage increase on the artifact, it's obviously amazing and intended for his skill 3, but it isn't exactly all that for his skill 1 or his skill 2. As a bonus though, Thorn of the Blue Rose is the first artifact in the game's history with bonus defense on it. This is actually a really genius decision in my opinion by the devs, as putting defense on artifacts in the future is one way for them to give more power to slower standard and turn 2 players without completely warping the game around Knights and Bruisers. I'm honestly really excited for the possibility of more artifacts getting defense on them in the future, and possibly artifacts with a combination of health and defense at the same time, foregoing attack. Overall, Guard Captain Krau continues a legacy of a character that has always had incredible unit releases. I expect Krau to be a major role player in the upcoming PvP format in a multitude of team compositions, but it's most likely going to be in the aggro and tempo based ones. His only real drawback in PvP is that he's pretty susceptible to debuffs, but again, if that ends up being the case, Sweet Miracle is always an option for him as an artifact. Luckily for you though, if you don't have a Sweet Miracle, you can pick one up with your limited 5-star artifact selector that you'll be getting in this patch. And those are my thoughts on Krau, but now I want to hear from you. Let me know what you think about him down in the comment section below, and don't forget to check out my impressions videos on both Victorica as well as Moonlight Aranka, both of which will be linked down in the video's description. And don't forget to subscribe for more content if you enjoyed this impressions video. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll see you all in the next one. Later now.